Grüß Gott, dear crypto friends, and welcome to today's video. And let us have a look what's happening in the market, because the market is again not as exciting as we would like it to be. So we want to know, when will this pump finally start? When will it finally start? What is the problem with Bitcoin? Why is it not pumping? And I can tell you why. I can tell you the problem here. This here is the freaking problem. This here, right here, okay? The dollar index. The dollar is pumping too much. It's just out of control. Look how much the dollar is pumping. Look how much it has been pumping. This is the monthly chart. And I've been talking about the dollar index ever since I started this channel, now half a year ago. And even back then, I think it was in October or something like that, I was saying like the dollar index is pumping too much, it has to correct at some point. That was in October. And since then, we have pumped from 94 to over 100 now. And it just doesn't want to stop. It's doing a weird, insane structure, very similar to the one in 1997. So in 1997, the dollar index was creeping upwards, and then instead of like correcting, it pumped even more. And then a huge dollar bull run started, where it was basically pumping from 1995 until 2001. So yeah, the problem is now the dollar index is pumping like crazy, and that is also the reason why Bitcoin is not going berserk, why we are not seeing 60, 70, 80,000 dollars yet, because the rising dollar is suppressing the Bitcoin price. We have talked about it many times on this channel. The dollar and Bitcoin are inversely correlated, so strong dollar is not good for Bitcoin and vice versa. So now that the dollar is pumping, Bitcoin cannot pump so much. It is actually insanely bullish, because if we take a look at the long-term Bitcoin price chart here, right, we can see that every time the dollar dumped, we had a Bitcoin pump. Look at this here. We see a strong inverse correlation here, 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 and here, right? So every time the orange line, which is the dollar index, went down, Bitcoin price pumped like crazy. And now look at what's happening. We are getting an insane dollar bull market here. So this is suppressing the price. And this was every time the case when the dollar was pumping, Bitcoin was not doing much. So this is suppressing our price, right? So the fact alone that Bitcoin is not dumping like crazy should already make us very bullish for Bitcoin, because that means that Bitcoin is really strong and is just waiting for the dollar to dump. So we look at our weekly picture and we immediately see that Bitcoin is not really dropping, even though the dollar is pumping like crazy, which is a quite insanely bullish sign. So we should be super happy. Okay, we should be super happy that Bitcoin is not dumping, even though the dollar is pumping like crazy. And we are still validating this long trend line here. We are still above this trend line. Now the weekly candle is starting to reverse. We have said that we have a long-term, very, very long-term hidden bullish divergence. It goes actually back far longer than I said last time. Actually, the bullish divergence starts in August 2020, right? We see that we have increasing prices. So we have this pump here in August 2020, which then saw a huge price increase. And we have all the time higher lows. From here to here to here, higher lows all the time, whereas the RSI is dropping and making lower lows. So this is like a hidden bullish divergence, and it is super strong, and normally it is a sign that we are going to pump. However, the problem is now, because the dollar is pumping so much because of these stupid rate hike announcements, this suppresses our Bitcoin rally, and Bitcoin will not see this huge rally that I was talking about, you know, this huge end of the year rally until December or January, where we are supposed to go to $230,000. This will not happen unless the dollar will start to dump. That is the problem. That is why we aren't seeing huge increases in the Bitcoin price. So what will happen now if the dollar keeps pumping? Let's take a look what will happen. What will happen now if we get this kind of scenario, which would be not fun, where we get a repeat of 1997, right? When we say here this scenario from 1995 to 2001, a 6-year dollar bull market. What would happen with Bitcoin now if we get this insane bull market? Well, friends, in that case, I think Bitcoin will not pump as crazy as we would like it to do. And this in turn will have, of course, consequences for the altcoin market. In this case, if the dollar keeps pumping for a long time, Bitcoin will not be really able to rise a lot. It will wobble around, maybe rise a bit, and then drop again. And it will not really be able to break through this channel here and make new highs. It will just, wobble around and maybe slowly crawl upwards, because at some point in 2024, we will have the halving, right? So at some point then the scarcity will be increased even more. So then the price will appreciate somewhat, but we cannot go to the upper trend line here if the dollar keeps pumping like crazy. So we really have to hope that the dollar will stop pumping. Now, what does this Fed fund rate hike have to do with the dollar index? Can we expect the dollar to stop pumping at some point? So then let us look at the dollar index and compare it with the Fed fund rate, right? With the interest rate given by the Federal Reserve Bank, Fed funds. So let us look what happens with the dollar index when the Fed fund rate gets raised. In blue we see the Fed fund rate, and in orange we see the dollar index. So let us take a look what happened the last time. The last time the dollar index started rallying already way before the fund rate was increased. It started pumping from 79 to 98, right? And the fund rate was not even raised yet. Only after the dollar was already quite high up, the Fed fund rate started to increase. It started to increase, but what happened? The dollar first pumped, made a new high, but then the rate increased more, and then it brutally dumped from over 100 to around 88, right? And then it got increased more, and then it started dropping again when the fund rate was decreased again due to the pandemic situation. And let's take a look what happened in 2004. So the fund rate was increased in 2004, reached a peak in 2006, 2007, and then got decreased again in response to the financial crisis. But the dollar first pumped together with this rate hike increase, but then fascinatingly, before the peak was reached, the dollar already started dumping. What? Huh? What is going on? That is strange, right? And in 2000, the situation was also quite strange, because the Fed fund rate already reached the peak, and then the rates were really decreased a lot, but the dollar was still pumping. And when the rate was already insanely low, then only did the dollar start dropping. So it seems as if the dollar has some kind of delay, right? It seems as if there is some kind of delay. So what could happen now is that the Fed fund rate will be increased, then it reaches a plateau, and then it will taper off again. And that the dollar, if it does what it did last time, it will first rise in anticipation of the rate hike, right? In anticipation. And then midway, when the rates were still being raised, we might get a brutal correction, and I don't know what afterwards, but a correction will probably already come before we have reached the peak in the Fed fund rates. So I still maintain the picture that it is very unlikely for me that we get a repeat of the 1995 situation where we now pump for 6 years straight. For me, this is quite unrealistic, and we are just waiting right now for the dollar to start its first correction. And because we are so overbought, it's just a matter of time until we see the first correction. And we don't need a long correction. We don't need like 1 year plus correction, right? We just need half a year or something where it just starts going down for a while or it doesn't pump. And that will already be enough for Bitcoin to make new all-time highs. However, if it still goes on pumping, for the unlikely case, I will just tell you, in the unlikely case that the dollar will just pump for 6 years like it did here, then friends, we will not get a Bitcoin rally, and Bitcoin will just slowly creep around the price range that we have now, and then slowly over the next years, 1, 2, 3, 4 years in the future, we will creep upwards until the next halving then saves us in 2024, because then the halving comes again into play, and this is a strong dynamic for the Bitcoin price appreciation. So it all depends on the dollar. When will the dollar correct? It's just a waiting game right now. We have to hope that the dollar corrects. If it goes on pumping, friends, then I'm really sorry. Then the worst case has happened and we will not get an insane Bitcoin rally. And we see the monthly Bollinger Band is already very narrow. So every time this happened, a huge breakout came, right? We had the situation in 2016. We had the situation in 2020, and now the Bollinger Band is narrowing again. So it's only a matter of time until we get a breakout, and I think it will be to the upside. But of course, we cannot exclude the stupid scenario, which nobody likes, right? Which nobody wants to hear, that we will be wobbling around in this long trend channel and not much happens until 2024, and then we get the rally because of a Bitcoin halving, right? That is the scenario that no one wants to hear, but I will tell you there is unfortunately a possibility that this might happen. Please keep that in mind. However, if that should happen, we still can count on an altcoin rally. We still can count on an altcoin rally, because in that case, Bitcoin will still make some kind of like retracement structure before then going probably and touching again this lower trend line here. And if that happens, we still might get an altcoin rally in this retracement sometime in summer this year, when Bitcoin goes again over 50k, 55, 58k or something like that. That is then the best we can hope for if the dollar keeps pumping like a crazy bastard. So that is the current picture, friends. We just have to see what's happening. Unfortunately, it's not only in the hand of Bitcoin and of Bitcoin adoption, it's also in the hand of the stupid dollar index. As sorry as I am to say this, we just have to hope for the best. And even if not, many altcoins will still pump in this retracement in summer. That is my current picture, friends. Short episode, was a short update. Next time we can look again at more altcoins and so on and so forth. But since the market is super boring and we are just ranging since basically a few months now, there is just not much action and not much going on. So I cannot make like insane videos all the time if not much is happening. I don't want to tell you every time the same thing, that we are just waiting for the dollar to dump, but that's unfortunately what happens. That's basically what we are waiting for. So I also don't expect this pump that started today. I think many people will freak out over it, but honestly, I don't think that this is going to go into a parabolic move. I don't think so. I think we're just continuing wobbling around here, and not much will happen until the dollar starts dumping. So friends, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this rather short video. I hope you have a great day. All the best from me, friends, and see you in the next video.